All right. A question I've gotten a number of times is how can I uh, dynamically, or what's the most efficient way to assign things to people? So assign approval. In this case, we're going to look at approvals, but this could be tasks in Planner or any other, basically any other scenario where there's sort of an assigned to field or column that's looking for an email address of a user in your organization. So we're going to keep this really simple, but just know that this can be applied to many, many different scenarios. So I have a really simple form here in Microsoft Forms where we're just saying what needs to be approved and then who is the approver. And I simply have a list of names here. So basically the idea is that when people fill out this form, they'll select the name of the approver, and then a Power Automate flow will run and get that person's email address in order to assign it. Now, there are a number of ways we can do this. I'm going to assume that you have a finite number of people or a finite number of approvers rather, and you want the cleanest way to do this. So you want to basically display a friendly name like their first and their last name, and you want to get their email address on the back end to assign that approval or whatever it is. So the way I'm going to accomplish this is to use a list in a SharePoint site. So this is a group form that is connected to my MS Forms sandbox group. So in the associated SharePoint site, I'm going to create a new list, and this will be a really simple basic list. I'll just select the standard list option here and call it approvers, or you could call it whatever you want. And when you create this blank list, it's going to have a simple, single one column called title, which is fine. You could, if you want to, rename this to name or something like that. I don't care. So I'm just going to leave it set as title. But you do want to add another column here of the type person. And just select person, click next. And I'm just going to call this, email, because it's really their person account or their record in the O365 user database, but calling it something like email is just fine. Now, there are cases where you could allow multiple selections. I'm not going to, but again, we're keeping this simple, so I'm just going to hit save. And then I'm going to populate this with those items. So basically I will and then for his email, this will basically look in your directory for that person. So if I type in Andrew Carter and copy, and I'm not going to add the other two, it would just take more time. So we'll just run with those three. I'll just delete these other two just to clean things up. But the point is, your list is just going to have a title for the name and a title for a person column. To be 100% clear, a person column that is that person's record in the user database. Now you'll see when you hover over this, it's showing their contact card because it's got all sorts of information. It knows their email address, it knows their manager, and all this, and that's because it is looking up their record in your Microsoft 365 user database. So it's got their name, it's got their email address. So what we're going to do later is extract just that email address, and we'll see how that works. So now in our flow here, now I just started kind of build a bare bones flow where I'm getting, when that form is submitted, get the response details. Now what I want to do is basically retrieve from this approvers list the value that matches the name they selected. Now, one point I want to make very clear is that the names here, the choices in your form need to be exactly match the title values in your list. And by exactly match, I mean same case, same spacing, no like leading spaces or trailing spaces. They need to be a 100% exact character level match. Otherwise, this is not going to work the way you want it to. So your best bet is honestly to copy and paste from one to the other just to be sure that they're exactly the same. All right. So now back in my flow, I'm going to get items from that list. Now, get items is an action that you use to get one or more items from a SharePoint list. Now, even if you're getting only one item, it's still going to be formatted. The output is going to be formatted as a list of items. So we'll need to deal with that, which we will. But basically, what I want to do is select the site address. So it's my forms sandbox, and the list name is approvers. There we go. Now, the important thing is we want to filter what's being returned. Now, if I just ran with the action as is, it's going to get that entire list of approvers, which I don't want. I just want the one that matches the name selected in the form. So I'm going to click Show All down here, and I'm going to, where is it? Filter query, here we go. Now this OData filter query, this is kind of, it can be a little scary. These are can be complicated to set up, but this one's actually pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is you need to use the internal name of the column, which is one of the reasons I kept this column named something simple like email, because short and simple, that is the internal as well as the display name for the column. So I need to type in the column name, email, EQ, which is short for equals, and then in single quotes, so 2 single quotes, and then in between that I'm going to enter the approver value from our get response details. So basically this is going to be the name that they selected when they submitted the form. So basically if someone runs this and they select Robert Hogan, then this means it's going to go to that approvers list and return just the one that matches Robert Hogan I'm sorry, actually I was wrong. We need to type in title. Sorry, I caught myself before I screwed up. So basically the title column, whatever column contains that information. So title equals approvers. And there we go. So if I hit save, and just to show you sort of how this runs or how this works, I'm going to call this test and select Andrew and submit. And then when I go over to our flow here, we'll see that it ran, and the response details were test and Andrew Carter. And then in get items, if we look at the output, we can see, where's our output here? So raw outputs. We'll see that it's returning item 2, where the title is Andrew Carter. Now there's all this other stuff here like email, author. Don't worry about that. What we're concerned with mostly is that it only returned a single row, and that row is the Andrew Carter row. So we're good. Now what we need to do is edit this, and we're going to add in another action to get the email address that matches that item, or that from that row that was retrieved. So I'm going to add in a select action, and select is an action that you can use for all kinds of cool and fun stuff. Mostly I use it for reshaping data, reshaping the output of these get item actions, or basically getting them in the format I want. So from now here we need to give it an array of data. It needs an array, so I'm going to give it the output of get items, which is just the body/value. That's it. That's our input. Now for this map, typically in a select action, you're getting basically you're getting an array of data in, or taking an array of data in and providing an array of data out. And an array would typically have multiple columns, like, I could have name and the name, and email and the email. In this case, all I want is the email address. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this to text mode. And it's really important that you do this, because if you try it any other way, it won't work. Switch it to text mode. And then in here, I'm going to select the, I need to see more, but basically we want the email. I know it looks funny, it looks redundant, but that's what we want. So we want email, which means it's going to, from the array that's returned, it's going to give me a single column array, a single list of the email addresses for the results. Now there's only going to be one result. And as a next step, so I'm just going to call this select email. The next step, because I want to add this into an assign to field in a approval. So if I create an approval, so I go to approvals and I'll say start and wait for an approval. And I'm going to just make this a first to respond. There's only going to be one assigned to, so it doesn't really matter so much. So I'll call the title as, we'll use the title of the item to be approved. And then the assigned to, this is where I want to plug in I need to switch to advanced mode in order to plug in some data. But if I plug in the output of that select, what we'll see is it throws it inside this for each loop. That's because it's an array. At least it sees it, it's in the form of an array. So it's going to apply, basically assign an item to each item in the array. Now the array is only one item, so we could kind of walk away and leave this, but I don't like having unnecessary loops. So what I'm going to do is remove that. We're going to move this outside of there, and we'll get rid of this for each. But what we need to do is assign it to the first, and really it'll be the only, but the first item from the output of that select. And we can do that right here by going to advanced mode and using an expression. So we'll use the function button here, and I'm going to use the first expression. Got to type in the right spot. First, which is going to give us the first element of an array and first of the output of select email. So that means that the output of select email is just that single column list of email addresses, which only has one, but I'm saying take the first one and give me that. So click add. So we'll see no loop, nothing to worry about there. So let me just save this. And I will we'll submit a new response here, and I'll say a mountain bike. And I'm going to ask Robert to approve that. So I'll hit submit and go over to my flow. We'll take a look and see that it is running. Okay, that's a good sign. Now it's running, it's basically sitting there waiting because it is it's waiting for that approval action to finish. This is one of the reasons I don't really love this start and wait for an approval. I much prefer creating an approval and then waiting for it separately. But if we just look at what has happened so far, we've gotten the response, we've gotten the items, we've selected the email, and when we look at that, we can see that the output is simply Robert Hogan's email address, which is what I need to feed into that approval. Now if I jump over to the profile where I'm signed in as Robert, if I go to okay, I'm not going to do that, but suffice it to say, I forgot that I changed that password recently, and I'm not going to bother finding the new one. But the point is, we know that that was assigned, and when Robert gets in and approves that, then this flow will finish. But we can see that we've used basically this list in SharePoint of title column containing the name, a person column that I called email in this case, but you can call it whatever you'd like. Just remember what you called it so you can reference that in your flow, to basically get the items filtered to the item that matches the one selected in the form, and then select the email address and then get the first email address to assign to that approval, or set the assign to in that approval. So hopefully this makes sense. Again, it's something that you're any scenario where you're going to be assigning things, whether it's approvals, whether it's planner tasks, whether it's just creating items in a list where there's an assign to field, or a person field that you want to set, you can use this trick, for lack of a better term, or this technique, to build this. Now, the real advantage of this is that as your approvers grow and change, basically if Robert's no longer an approver, I can simply delete this row, and most importantly, delete him as a choice for the approver field. If I have a new approver that I need to add them here in the form and then add them to this list. That is the one catch, is that you need to make sure that the sort of the choices here on your form where you're selecting the people and the items in your list that you're getting the people from, that they continue to match exactly. But as long as you do that, this is incredibly scalable. You could have 10 people, you could have 20 people, you could have 100 people. And the nice thing is that in your flow, you're using very efficient actions. You're just getting the items, filtering the results, and then selecting the appropriate value, and then using the first response to assign whatever it is you're assigning.